So it's week 13. We're going to continue on with our Laravel PHP site. I said it was 80 megs, 23 megs, which copies very slowly on my machine for some reason. Code is also up on GitHub. So once it's finished copying, we'll use our command line to launch it. If you don't have your local web server running, so last week several people had to install either XAMPP or WAMP server, make sure that you start it up. So you just have to look for your XAMPP server or your WAMP server, and there's a start. There'll be a start link you can click to get it running. Some of you may have configured it so that it runs automatically every time you start your boot up your operating system. So once this is done copying, I'm going to rename my folder to lesson 13. I'll open it up with my code editor so we can keep working with it. So here's where we left things off last week. We need to kick this off using our command line. So I'll just click on my start button and type cmd prompt. And then I want to browse into my lesson 13 folder. Directories. If you're using WAMP, your directory would be C WAMP www, and then whatever folder your lesson 13 is in. If you're using XAMPP, the path is different. I can't remember what, I think your path is C XAMPP HT docs. So CD is change directories. If I do a dir command here, it will show me all the files. Dir shows all what's in any folder. CD is change directory. So to launch our server, we run the command php artisan and serve. This will launch our Laravel server. So this is what we did last week once we installed our application to get it running on localhost. PHP artisan serve. And it tells me that our Laravel dev server is started up at localhost 8000. We should be able to hit localhost 8000 now. And we have our home page back up. I'll put that command on Blackboard if that helps. So here's your command on Blackboard, PHP artisan serve. Last week, we talked a lot about this acronym, MVC. I think I already mentioned it today. We'll be doing more of it in September. What is MVC again? Jaquinder, what does it mean? I know. So Brenda? Okay, and what do those things mean? You're right. It stands for model, view, and controller. What is a model? What is a view? What is a controller? And how do they work together?
Model is what we see on screen, and view is what we see on screen.
Yep.
And controller is the code where we control that who the user is and what the password is.
Okay.
And
that's one of the things the controller does, yes. And what about the model?
Model is where everything stores.
Okay. All right, so if we go back and have a look. To how we kind of talked about this last week. Right here was our architecture. So you're right that the view is our user interface. So in this case, it's a web application, but we could have other kinds of views. It doesn't have to run in a browser. Our model represents our data, and our controller sits in between. It's the logic. So it takes requests from the view, talks to the model, fetches data, saves data on the model, and then brings back any response data from the model to our view. Okay, so it could be something like the view sends in a username and password. The controller passes those to the model and asks the model to run a query. The model will return one of two responses to the controller, and the controller then directs what view should load depending on whether that username and password was a valid credential or an invalid credential. So Laravel is designed to give us this kind of structure and pattern. If we look at our files we built last week, so inside of resources, these were our views. So this view, this welcome, this was built automatically by Laravel. It generates kind of a homepage for us. What's this code doing here? Here's our homepage. What's this extends doing? What's the purpose of that command? Sorry?
Data from layout.
Yeah, not so much. You're close. Not exactly data. What's in our layouts file? What's the purpose of this file? Layouts.app. Yeah, it's basically a page template. So inside of layouts, we created a page template that's got the header and footer. So instead of including an individual header and individual footer, we built out a template file, and we're saying all our pages extends or use this template. And in the middle of our template, that's where our page content gets injected. Below the header, above the footer is where our page content comes in. Welcome. And we also, well, Laravel built this one. We added some code to it, but we didn't create this file. This one, though. So again, our albums page, it extends our layout. It uses the same template, so we get the same CSS header and footer. And then we use similar syntax to what we were using with traditional PHP. We still used for each, but our Blade template syntax is a lot cleaner, right? We don't need those angled brackets and question marks and PHP tags. So we just put in the @ symbol before our for each. It also means we don't need our curly braces or semicolons. So there's probably, we're maybe a little less likely to make errors with our syntax. We don't have to concatenate and go inside and outside of quotation marks. And we use this handlebars or mustache syntax whenever we wanted to output any server-side or PHP values. So this was our, would this be our model, our view, or our controller for the albums? Yeah, it's a view, right? It's a user a page we're actually presenting to the end user, and it lives inside of resources and views. So we've basically stripped out all of the code like we had in our traditional albums.php code page. We have the user interface code, but we also had all the logic and all the code that talked to our database, connected to the database, set up an SQL query, executed it. Where's all that stuff? If we click on, if I go to my albums link, it looks fairly similar to before. So it's presenting the data, but all we see here is the presentation. There's really not much logic here other than a simple loop. So where is this? Where does our album data come from in this case? Okay, so we created, or Laravel built for us, this file up here in roots under app and HTTP. We had a root file. So this code was here. This is what loads the home page. We talked about last week, when we use MVC frameworks, typically the URLs do not magically load a view. We have to explicitly tell the controller for every path we want to handle which view to load. So when the path is our root folder with a /no-name, we're going to load the welcome page. Then we added this code when our path was /albums, and notice there's no file extensions here, so we can write friendly URLs, good for search engines. We wanted to load our albums view, but first, what's happening here? What's going on line 24? Yep. Does it get it directly from the database? What does it use to get the data from the database? Right, we created this file, so we linked here to an album model, which we created over here. So we created an album model. Laravel automatically assumes if we have a model with a capital letter at the beginning and a singular name, that there's a table in our database with the same name, all in lowercase and with an S on the end. So it does all this stuff sort of magically, but we have to follow the rules of how to name things properly. So we created this model, and our controller uses our album model, runs a get command, and also sets an order by it, then gives us, just like in our traditional PHP code, we get this object called albums that has all the data from our albums table. And then when we load the view, we want to pass this. We now need to hand the data off to the view. Not enough to load the page. We need to load the page, but we need to actually give it the data so that it can be displayed. So this is how our albums data gets rendered. So we've kind of done one of the create, read, update, delete operations. We can read data. So today, let's start with adding a form so we can now deal with a different type of request. Instead of a GET request, what kind of request are we going to run to save the new data? We're going to need a form. Yeah, so we'll need a post request. So the first thing we want to do is let's set up, well, maybe on our albums like we already had. Here. Let's put on a link here. Now remember, these are kind of virtual or friendly URLs. On our old application, it linked to album-details.php. What would be a good descriptive friendly URL for our form? It's going to start with a slash. So what should the URL in the browser be? So notice here, it just says /albums. There's no extension. And the idea of a friendly URL is the URL should actually describe what the page is doing. Okay, so we could do it. We could do that if we wanted to, or we talked about APIs before. They will often write them in this form, album/add. And we talked about APIs a few weeks ago. So this is often if we have a slash in the name of the table, that page, that URL will list all the data. If we have the name of our table /add, that's often going to be for adding a new one. So let's add that link. Now we get a nice little link here. Okay, so now we've got our 404. Our link shows up, but server doesn't know what to do with that URL. So we need to do two things. What two things do we need to do here in order to make this error go away and display a view that has a form for adding a new album? Okay. Okay, so let's create the view, and then I'm going to have you guys on your own add the route handling to the roots file so that the page actually loads. So we're going to go down here under resources and views. We're going to make a new view. So I'm in resources and views. I'm going to make a new PHP file, and we want it to use this same templating, so we'll call it add add-album.blade. If you want to give it a different name, you can. It's under resources and views. We won't change this yet. We'll have to get it to use our template and we'll have to build a form. But for now, we just want to be able to load this page, even though it will be blank right now. So now what I want you to do on your own, if I click my link again, I still get a not found. So what I want you to do is go into your roots file now and add the URL mapping, so this path will now show our add album view. So you have to look in your app HTTP roots file that we did last week. So right now it can read or map two URLs, the root URL and /albums. So you're going to need to add a third method in here for the URL /albums/add. And we want it to load the page we just created. I want you to try that on your own.
Is this being recorded right now?
Yes.
And I'll just wait until after the recording to ask the question.
Okay. I think so. Yeah. Check mine and see if it. Second. Do you have a vendor folder at all? When you did your install, is there a vendor folder even in there? Well, no, it should be right in the root. We'll have to figure out why. Okay, so that's our clue. Okay, yeah, it should be a blank page. Okay, so it's saying you can't find that page. So let's just look in your roots file. Yeah, roots. And do you have inside of, where is this file? This work. Wasn't that last one? You left, Mike? Problem is, if you know that's different. You checked it with, have a look on my GitHub. That's where it's from, where it used to be. Can't open files, you need to open it using localhost. You need to start your command line and run the command I put online. Anybody get it to load successfully the right view? It's localhost 8:8000. Everybody here get their view to load? No? Show me. Things.
I don't know how to get some of the folders, so maybe during the break you can help.
Okay.
And then I'm just following along.
So we've created this add album. So what do we need here in order to load that page? We've created a link, we've created the view, but our controller has to match that link to call that view. So how would we do it? Right now, this link that still doesn't go anywhere. Doesn't automatically know which view to load. We've got to specify. Anybody in the room who knows? Oh. So exactly the way we load the home page up on line 18 to 20. We have a GET request in the root. We load the view called welcome. In this case, when we have a GET request made at /album/add, we're going to load this view. So now when I load my link, this is what I should get. So pretty much the identical code from up here. We're not passing in any data. We're just taking the URL and we're telling the server what view should be loaded when we have a GET request here. If you look at line at 18 and 33, the only thing that's different is the path name. Different path loads a different view name. Mike, still nothing on your vendor file? You know what I'm curious to try, Mike? If you take my Git repository and download it and copy the vendor folder that I've got into your root, let's see what happens. Okay, let's try that. Let me know. So try this root handler down here on lines 33 to 35 and see if you can load your page if you've been having trouble. Does that work for you? Thank you, Cassidy. So now we need to build this view. I mean, we've created it, but there's no code on it. There's nothing on. We want a form so that we can actually add a new album. So just like our albums page that extends the layout and has a content section, we'll use this same kind of syntax, and then we'll get our header and footer, and then putting the form on is simple. Well, that's just plain old HTML, which everyone knows how to do by now. So we'll go to add album. You can take out all the template code, and at the top, we'll say it extends our main template. Yep.
It's like the layouts, it's the name of the folder.
Yes, the layout is the name of the folder. So if we go here, here's the oops. Sorry, so it's inside of public. No, it's not inside of public. Thank you. Under resources, views, and layouts. So it's because it's inside the folder called layouts. And then it's looking for the file called app. So then we'll end the section. Oops. If we refresh now, we haven't put any content on, but if we refresh now, we should get a blank page, but the page should at least have our template. Our header and footer should be here. Right, so we get our header and footer now. So inside our content, we can put on a heading. It should now show up for us. The rest of this is just our simple form. We won't worry about the image. We'll just want input fields for the album title, the year, and the artist, and a submit button. We'll put on a form. What method should we use for our form? Saving a new album. Yeah, we want post. We actually don't need an action. Before we had an action and it went to our save album page. We don't actually need a save album page. This form will actually post to itself. So we don't have to create a separate page for saving. We'll look at how that works in a minute. Now we'll just build our simple form with 3 field sets with labels and text boxes. This form is basically pretty much identical to the form we built in traditional PHP, with the exception of there's no action tag. So we'll just have 3 sets of sets with a label text box pairing. So we can copy those field sets. We have title, we have year. Say our year is a number, and the minimum is, I don't know, 1,600, 1,300, something like that. And then we just want a save button down at the bottom. So that's the end of our form. We don't need any PHP code on here other than the Laravel section and extends declarations, so that we get our template and our form shows up in the middle of our page after our header, but before our footer. And again, we'll come back to this and we'll talk about why there is no action tag here. We can put one in if we want, but we really don't need one. Because our save page we were using before, it's not visible. All we want to do is add the new album to the database, and then where should we take the user after we save a new album? Yeah, let's take them back to the albums page when we're done. So there's our completed form. Right, my validation's working. What will happen if we try to submit the form now? I will put the code back up. I know you want to see it. Some of you are still copying it. What will happen if I try and submit the form now that it's complete? 3 possibilities. Well, I could get an error. Nothing could happen, or it could save a new album. You think we'll get an error? What do you think the error will be? Sorry, Haywan, I think you said it. No, it wasn't you? Krupa, what error? Why will we get a 404 error? You're right, we are going to get a 404 error. How come? Well, kind of, sort of. Where right now, what page is going to receive the form post? What URL is going to get the form post? What URL are we on right now? We're on album/add. If we don't specify any action here, and we're not going to, which page is going to load when this submits? Yeah, it's going to post, well, to the same URL. We'll post to album/add. So why did I get this? We know this URL works. Why does it work when I do this, but not work? Why does it not work when I do that? It's the same URL. How come it worked the first time, but it didn't work when I submitted the form?
Because it's receiving a post request.
Right, if we look at our controller, we've told our application what to do at this URL, but only when the method is get. So when the method is get, it says load the blank form. Now we need to also add a handler for post. Using two different types of requests at the same URL. First, we handle a get request, then we handle a post request. So in our original application, we had a save page for doing that. We don't really need a save page. We just need to set up a root post at albums add. So this is the code that will run when the user clicks the submit button. It calls back the same page, but it's running a post request rather than a get request. So we're going to see this when we use C# and ASP.NET. We're going to see the same thing later on next year when we use Node.js. We can load the same page, but it will do different things depending on whether the users triggered a get or a post. So they trigger a get by typing the URL or clicking on the link to load the page. They trigger a post by completing the form and clicking the save button. Now, for now, just temporarily to get the error to go away, we won't save them. We'll take a break in a minute. We'll add the code for actually saving an album after. For now, let's just take them back to the home page. That way, at least we know this code works. So this is temporary. So go home page just for now. When they submit the form, we'll just take them to the welcome page. Nothing's getting saved yet. We just want the error to go away. Now, this may or may not solve our problem, but we'll try it. Here again is all the code for the form in case anybody needs to see it. I'll leave it up for a minute. You can even copy and paste from your add album form that we've done all semester long. The HTML is exactly the same. Mike, any luck? Different error, same error? Same thing. Okay. I'll come look again on the break, okay? See if we can figure it out. And again, here was our root. So I'm going to try and submit the form again. If it works properly, we should just get the home page, taken to the home page. So if I just refresh it and resend. Okay, we got a different error. So obviously adding that post handler did something, right? Because that original error has gone away. We got a different response. token mismatch exception. CSRF token. What on earth does that mean? Good guess. It's actually not a name exception. Take a quick look for Laravel. Look online for Laravel CSRF token. See if you can find out what that means. We haven't made reference to it in our code, but this is a clue that we might need to. If anyone's found a description for what this is in plain English, let me know and we'll share that. What is a Laravel CS? Yes?
It's because the host creates a new session. And when they are matched with the session that we had in the new session, they're different.
Okay, yes. So what do you know what CSRF stands for? Can we find that?
Cross-site request form. Cross-site request forgery.
Cross-site request forgery. Okay, thank you. So what does that mean exactly? What is a cross-site request forgery? So Mateus, you're on the right track and that is the right description, but what does that mean? And why is it not letting us submit our form? Without this, it's trying to call some method, verify SR CSRF token. So what's actually going on here? Sorry?
Unauthorized command.
Right, so it's looking for something. It is unauthorized in a way. Can you explain a bit more? Because what you were saying was right about checking the sessions.
Trying to create another session with the variables in the request that we have, or we don't need.
Okay, and what's the problem with that? Why is Laravel not letting us do this? First link, CSRF protection. So you're right, it's about protection and authentication. Let's look at what this is. We didn't need to do this with our regular HTML forms. It is protecting us from cross-site request forgery. This is when someone on a different domain builds a form and tries to post that form data to our site, usually sending us malicious input to try and hack our site. Okay. So the idea is Laravel creates a token that basically shows for every session on our site. So any form that's submitted has to have that token. That way, if someone puts a form up on a different domain and tries to post it to our domain, the tokens are not going to match. And Laravel will prevent that user from being able to submit data from their domain to ours. So it's a very common type of hacking attack. To do is we need a little tag in our form with Laravel that says generate a cross-site, so that we know when the form is submitted, this form is safe, it's from our own site, it's not from somebody else. So all we need to do is add this little tag called CSR field. That's a built-in Laravel method. It will generate a secure token that basically authorizes the user on our site to submit a form. So somewhere in our form, in our view, and we'll take a break in a minute, I'll just maybe put it at the top. Just has to go anywhere inside of our opening and closing form tags. Can't put it up here, can't put it down there. So in here, if we just enter CSRF field, this won't get printed to the screen. This is server-side PHP code. So let's go back and refresh our form. This should get rid of that error, and then we'll take a break. So when I add an album, we don't see anything. But if you look, where can you see the token? Harry? Yeah, so we've got, it generates a hidden input where it generates this token. So in effect, this is kind of like a session ID, as Matthias was saying. So when we submit the form, it checks whether my user session ID matches that ID. If it does, it means I'm submitting the form from this website. The form submission is not coming from somewhere else on the internet. So now if I fill out my form, it should get taken to our home page, right? Error goes away. So now it's properly accepting our form post. So this is one of the nice things about a framework like Laravel. It has these kinds of features and checks built into it, right? When we build a form the traditional way, the way we've been doing it, there is nothing automatic to check and prevent a cross-site scripting attack. So another domain sending malicious data into our form. Whereas Laravel's built this in, and all we need to do whenever we include a form is just make a call to generate that token. So it's an extra security check, because these kinds of attacks happen all the time. So now when we submit our form, our post runs. We'll take this code out after, but for now it loads our homepage. So I think we'll take a break here. Sorry that we went a little bit long there. So when we come back, we're going to take this line out. We're going to use our album model to save the new album, and then we want to redirect to our albums page. Then we'll also add the delete functionality. We should be able to do that by 4 o'clock, and then we'll give you your lab. Okay? I'm going to stop the video stream. I'll put what we've done up on GitHub so far.